Look, here's the deal. Knowing how to carry things is not the same as knowing how to heal from them. It's the truth. I knew how to show up for others. I knew how to respond. I knew how to work. I knew how to keep moving. I knew how to be the person that people could count on. But for a long time, I really didn't know how to show up for myself. I've gone through a lot of work, a lot of trial and error, a lot of trying things, getting it wrong, starting over again. Messed up some major parts of life and had to find ways to recover and move forward. But along that pathway, I started to learn something that has become a major part of this project, and that is caring is not the same as healing. And that is honestly why this space exists. So welcome to the Unarmored Project podcast. This is episode number 1. I wanted to start a little bit about talking about why I have jumped into making this space exist. I promise you it's not going to be perfect. This is not a clinical space. I'm not somebody who's got everything figured out. I'm probably the furthest from that. But I come with honesty, because that's really what I wanted to create this space around, is putting down that armor and being more honest, vulnerable about our experiences. I created the Unarmored Project because I realized we need to do better at having real conversations. We need to be sharing our stories and helping people find places where they can move forward without feeling they have to carry things all by themselves. So this episode's not about having all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. That'd make life so much easier, but that's not what we're here for. It's about telling the truth. It's about me opening up about why I jumped into this project and have gotten it going. This is a very personal thing. It's personally attached to my story and my journey, and something that I hope you find connection with and some resonance in. Because at the end of the day, we need a camaraderie. We all need those reminders that we're not the only one dealing with this stuff. I have worked through a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about on my own in isolation, and it was really when I opened up and had my brotherhood and sisterhood come join me and be part of my journey that things really started clicking. The reality is, the more I've worked on this project, the more I've realized that I'm not the only one out there carrying something heavy, and neither are you. So I chose the name The Unarmored Project because I was carrying armor figuratively and literally for a majority of my adult life. I was in the Army, 20 years old, 21 years old, prepping for deploying overseas for what ended up being a 1.5-year long combat mission in Iraq. Carried armor every day, and I was a medic for a grunt team. Loved that job, loved the guys and the gals that I worked alongside. A lot of fond memories and a lot of very crappy ones too, man. But every day showed up with armor. In order for me to show up as Doc, I had to be primed, ready, confident, and that meant underlying I had emotional armor on every single day too. I never wanted to show my guys that I was nervous or scared or feeling rough in any given day, so I took that to heart. I worked in the ER after coming home and continuing my medical journey as a civilian. Full disclosure, I was National Guard, so I got to play Army and civilian at the same time. And worked in the ER, same kind of thing. I had to show up 4 shifts to get that paycheck, ready, capable, in a mindset that I can handle whatever's being thrown our way that day and move through it. Worked on ambulance, the box, both as an EMT and as a paramedic, and carried armor in that. Again, figuratively and literally, where we had little bulletproof vests in our box just in case we went into active police scenarios. But when you show up on an ambulance ready to show up for somebody's worst day, man, you got to be ready. You have to have the mind right. You can't have emotions weighing you down. And so I, had armor up for that. I've been a firefighter now for the last 9 years, and same thing. I show up to work to be called on people's worst days, whether we're going into fire, dealing with EMS patients, just random citizen complaints or needs. We show up and people expect us to be there, be ready, and do our jobs to the best of our abilities. And outside of all those places, I've worn an armor too. Struggle with letting people in, letting people know how I'm really feeling, being open and honest with what's going on with me. I keep that stuff or had kept that stuff really locked in tight. As a father, as a husband, as a friend, always willing to be there or try to be there for other people, but struggling with allowing anybody to be there for me because my mindset was locked in, I got this. What I've been learning over the last several years now is that armor makes sense, right? It makes sense on these jobs, whether you're in the Army, military in general, whether you're working police force, EMS, dispatching, you have to have some form of armor. We wear uniforms, we have protective equipment, we have SOPs, we put on our gloves, bunker gear, ballistic protection, we have scrubs, PPE, we wear helmets and all this other stuff to protect our bodies, and that's what the job requires. It's part of what we do. We put on armor so that way we can go handle the things that we signed up to handle and get the job done. And that armor matters. It's important, helps us do the job, helps us survive, helps us be able to walk confidently into environments that most people are running their way out of. So when I talk about the Unarmored Project or putting our armor down, it's very important. Armor is not the enemy. It has a purpose, we need it, we use it, it helps us survive. But we can't live in it all the time. The thing I struggled with the most was knowing when it was okay to be safe and vulnerable and open and take that emotional armor off. And I equate it to, it's like wearing your body armor every day, whether you're awake, whether you're asleep, whether you're going to the crapper, going to the store, whatever it is. If you always keep that armor on, it just eventually weighs you down, it burdens you, it starts to cost us. For me, it cost me connection. It cost me honesty. It cost me relationships. And it cost me the ability to say I'm not okay. That cost became super real and it hit really hard and fast. So we got to remember, we put that armor on to survive the work, but we can't live in that armor forever. So my whole story really starts around my breaking point, and a lot of stuff went in there. So at this time I was a family guy. I had a wife, a kid. I had just come back from combat deployment number 3, where I was a medevac medic. I had already been working in EMS, both on the box and in the ER for a number of years, so I've been doing stuff. Like I said, 3rd combat deployment, I've lost brothers. I've seen, my military family members come home missing things on themselves. I've been in firefights at that point. I had my encounters with the drunks and the drug addicts on the streets from the box. I've, seen people come and go in my EMS world and in the hospital, worked plenty of cores at that point. I had already been through, experienced, and handled a lot. And what I hadn't done is find a way to really vent that off, to filter it out, to not keep carrying it. Because I was so built up, so locked in my emotional armor that nothing could get out and nothing could get in. So I had just come back hot from a deployment. I had 1 week, jumped into a fire academy because I'm trying to provide for my new baby, my wife, and so this was the way. I was going to get paid better, I was going to have a better schedule, life was going to be great, I'm going to still get to do what I love, start kind of transitioning to something new. And I jumped into it so fast that I never processed any of the stuff that I was going through, and I never adjusted to coming back home and just being with my family. And suddenly life was just completely overwhelming. My relationship was stressed. I didn't really know how to handle my son, who at that time was just about 1 year old. And, I missed most of his first year of life already too, so he was a completely foreign object in my life. Finances were strained because I had to have a job to provide for my family, so I was carrying that. I had all this emotional stress that I just had not processed. I locked it into a box, and I started to find myself disconnected, feeling the pressure. I was showing up to academy disengaged, not confident. And along that line, it ended up leading to me being resigning under some guidance. I was dismissed with the option to resign from that academy and fire service. And it just all broke. That's where the dam just let go and everything hit all at once. And in full disclosure too, I was already drinking just to get through the day, to keep my mind from wandering into places I didn't want it to go. And when I got dismissed and turned in my resignation letter, it just, everything fell through. So going home didn't feel safe. I didn't have a workplace that I felt safe because I just lost that. The military was all quiet at that point because we were just hot off the deployment. I was disconnected from friends, family, and I started telling myself this story that if I couldn't perform and I couldn't achieve what I had set out to achieve, then maybe life would be better if I was not in it, because I was no longer worthy. I wasn't enough. I was broken. And that story just spiraled and built, led me to a very dark hole that I didn't know how to get out of. I'd already been through combat deployments. I'd already lost my friends, family members. I've already spent all these years working in the ER, on ambulances, high stress environments. I should know how to handle moving on through pain, crisis, injuries, deaths, trauma, stress, all of it. That was my job. That was what I was there to do. And here I am, faltering and unable to even just get through a single day without feeling like I was completely falling apart. The lie built to the point where I just knew that my family, the world, and myself would be better off if I was just dead. So I'm going to say this carefully. I have had my own experience with near suicide. I'm not trying to shock you by sharing this. I'm just trying to be open and honest. And because I went through that, I changed. I had to change. It changed the way I think about support, changed the way I think about prevention, changed the way I think about all the conversations I wasn't having and that we as a community continue to not have. When I hit that point, I was emotionally and mentally alone. I was overwhelmed, and it led me getting dangerously close to ending my life. We're not going to go into the details because really the details are not important right now, but I will say this. Right as I was hitting that brink of moving from thought into action, I was crying in a closet, and my son cried out, his little baby cry, from his sleep, needing whatever it was. And he cried out, and that immediately stopped my world. It broke the thought train. It broke my mindset. In a way, it broke who I was in that moment completely. Just knowing I had this little baby crying. All he needed was somebody to show up. And probably not do a lot, maybe change a diaper, give him a little feedy time. And I realized in that moment that I at least had that to live for. The next thoughts through my mind were, I have to find a better way to deal with this stuff. I can't keep doing the same routine. I can't keep fighting myself and bearing myself and holding it all in. That's not fair to me. It's not fair to my family. It's just not the way to keep moving. I'll be honest, nothing overall changed in that minute other than those two thoughts. Life didn't suddenly become better. I didn't have any answers, but the pause, that little pause and break in thought and spiral mattered. So again, like my son's cry, it didn't fix everything, but it interrupted my lie long enough for me to know that I needed help. And that's really where I began my mental health journey. It's not the end of the struggle. It wasn't clean. None of this is a polished turning point where everything suddenly became rainbows, unicorns, and butterflies. But it's the beginning of me realizing that the pathway I was on wasn't going to save me. It wasn't going to help my family. It wasn't going to help myself. It wasn't going to lead anywhere good. And I just needed to stop, reset, and find help. So that first call I made was to my dad. And I told him, hey, I'm about to do something stupid. I need you to come and, help safety check my house because I don't want any opportunity. My dad came over, no questions asked, other than, are you okay? He reminded me he loved me. And he went and got my firearms out of the house, pulled the alcohol out of the cupboard, made sure that any of those temptations were just removed 100% immediately. He gave me a hug and he told me, it might not feel all right, but it's going to be all right. And that he's there to support me. And that meant a lot because that was the first time I felt like I had somebody who's been a role model in my life who mattered and always been there for me, and that I was finding myself modeling in a way out there, share that my vulnerable moment was okay. So kind of backstepping from that, like things I was doing that absolutely was not working. Before that moment, I've been doing what I've come to find out most of us do. Been trying to cope without really facing what was bothering me. I would turn to friends, we go out, we get drunk, we tell our jokes and our stories about life, but I kept everything so superficial because I can't let that stuff bother me, right? I would go to the gym and lift weights, get that physical exertion out, make myself sweat and sore so that way maybe that's where that pain could go into, right? I go snowboarding, disconnect from the day-to-day and just enjoy being out and about in nature and doing, again, physical things that brought some exhilaration. I'd go shooting. I'd go to the range, blast off some rounds, just get that focus and attention into something that I could create energy into. And the reality is I was looking for ways to find decompression, to distress, to burn off that energy that had been building up, to try to decompress, or to just feel like I had control over something. Another thing I would do, go ride motorcycles. Me and my buddies or my dad would go up, hit the canyons, carve through them, really kind of see how far we could push things, or just get out and go for lazy, easy rides and be away from it all. And the reality is not all of these things were bad or incomplete in their own ways, and most of them are honestly healthy things that we can be doing for ourselves, aside from, I'd say, turning to the bottle. But for me, I wasn't doing anything that made me directly face what I was carrying. Because again, I was doing all of these things while still holding on to that internal armor. I was managing my symptoms, but I wasn't actually doing anything to heal the wounds that were there. I had this really jacked up mentality that the burdens are what I signed up for, that the burden are something I charged myself with. I'm not going to be buried by my burdens. I grew up old school military and man mentality of we put up or we shut up. We are producers, we get shit done. And I lived that lie, and I lived by rules that I didn't necessarily agree to, but I bought into. That we don't talk about our feelings, that we were rocks for everybody, that if we need something, we handle it on our time. We don't bother people with our crap. So again, I had the lie. I had these other rules, unwritten rules that I was suffering from. Living by what other people's rules about what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a soldier, what it meant to be a paramedic and first responder, what it meant to be strong. And in that version of strength, needing help felt like failure. I had confused silence with strength. I had confused suffering with quietly being capable. And I never really thought about finding resources, therapy, counseling, or support outside of just bottling all up, putting it in that box, finding ways to move on. And the reality was this led me to being depressed, being overwhelmed, and just being in this deep, dark hole that I had been digging over the course of years. So, hit this moment, found out these rules, started recognizing my patterns needed to change. I needed to change. What the hell do I do next, right? So I started searching for support. At the time, I had just gotten back to, my next step was getting work. So I got back on the box, I got back in the ER, make that money, keep the family going, and started quietly looking for pathways of help. And I turned first to the EAP at our hospital. We had counseling services available to us, and so I gave one a shot. It didn't work. I'm going to tell you that some of the hard parts about going through this is realizing I'd been through, at this point, 3 combat tours. I'd worked for hospitals, I'd worked on the ambulance, I had sat through meetings and briefings and presentations about all these resources for me that were available, and I had blown them completely off for the last, I think at that point it was almost 15 years. Just blew them all off because I was not going to be the guy who needed that crap. That's for people who can't hang, who can't manage, for weaklings. And now here I am, sitting in that lie, needing this stuff. So I took a blind shot, found the phone number for the EAP clinical line, gave him a call, took a couple weeks to get an appointment, got paired up with a therapist who, quite frankly, was not EMS informed, not trauma informed. And it went oddly. I started talking about some of the things I'd experienced at that time, and they kind of told me, oh, well, you've got trauma. I'm like, well, no shit, I've got trauma. I've been through 3 combat tours. I work in trauma every day in the ER and on the boss. Life is full of trauma, and I'm the guy who signed up to show up for it. And so they pointed out these superficial things that I already knew, but I didn't really have a way to feel like they connected or understood me. Therefore, how the hell am I supposed to trust that they know how I can move through it? So I disconnected from it and started going through other things, finding grounding work, yoga, breathing exercises, stuff like that, and started listening to my Army chaplain a little bit more. And that was the first real big step, right? I would confide in my dad here and there, talk about some of the struggles I was going through. He talked to me about his journey through divorce and struggles with trying to raise my brother and I. So we would have these more in-depth talks, but still wasn't getting full release. But it felt better. I had a space I could start being vulnerable again. And then chaplains started coming by a little bit more often when I was, on duty for the Army. And I started taking some extra time to talk with the chaplain. And he would give me some advice. He'd give me some things that I could focus in on. And I realized, okay, maybe there's something to this. And at one point, I kind of opened the box a little bit more, and he was like, brother, you got to go get more help. And he gave me the phone number to the Army Center for Family Support Services. Said, give these guys a call. We can get you sessions. It'll be no cost to you, and I think you really need it. And after that first EAP program experience that I had gone into, I was really hesitant about it, so I kind of blew it off for a little while. I dragged my feet. And while my chaplain was there to support me and give me the number, one thing I realized over the course of my journey is man, I could have really used someone who just said, look, I've worked with these guys, I trust these guys, I use it, you should too, because it works, it helps, and they understand us. Had I heard that, I think at that moment, I would have made that phone call faster. One thing led to another. My ex and I got into couples counseling and therapy for a while, and that had some help. It gave me things I could focus on and work on, but it also was a little bit odd for me because I just felt like I didn't quite get understood or heard in that space either. So I struggled with really fully investing into it. And then deployment number 4 hits. And now I'm senior NCO, acting first sergeant. And I got to get my boys ready to go up and out the door. My family life is struggling at this point now. We have 3 kids, and I'm about to go back out the door. So I leaned really heavily into my chaplains. I started becoming more vulnerable about the weight of life with my friends and those around me in my peer group. So I was making these progress steps and they were so slow. And I was taking that chaplain time while I was overseas. And when I came back, my whole world ended up flipped upside down. My wife and I at the time, we realized that we were so disconnected in life that things just weren't working anymore. And within a month, I had moved out. And we began our journey of separation. Loved my kids and recognized that I had all this trauma, stress, baggage that I didn't want to just pour into them. So I really took it up a notch. And at this point, I was also with my current fire department and realized we had more sources and started investing a little bit more. And I finally made that call to the family services through the military and the military support system. And that worked out really, really well. I actually finally, for the first time, was talking to somebody with clinical experience and background and certification that also understood the military, the trauma, and the drama and the hardships with life. And that was my first major leap in this journey. So I was investing in that pretty much as soon as I got home. I was being more vulnerable and open in space. And I was now eager to learn and find more resources because Lord knows I needed them. So all this stuff got listed in these briefings, right? And I had this now new pinnacle moment with the National Guard here in Colorado. We have access to this whole support structure. And over the years since I joined, we have been building programs and education behind getting the support services into the service members' hands. And I had been through PowerPoint brief and presentation after PowerPoint brief and presentation up to this point, and recognized that because it was being presented, but there was no real show of buy-in from anybody in the community, I had this block in my brain that either the stuff isn't worth it or there's going to be some punishment, reprimand, weakness shown through it. So I had been ignoring it all this time, and I judged it. I judged the thought of using those resources previous to that last deployment. And once I got in, then man, it cracked the whole world open. My career didn't suffer, it got better. My life didn't suffer, it got better. I didn't suffer, I was getting better. I was actually starting to find the wounds and put some healing into them. And so all of a sudden, my whole mind shift has changed on this. But my mind shift is changing around this actively, and I realized for the first time that we're not using this stuff the way we should be. I didn't want to use it. None of my friends were using it as far as I knew. We weren't talking about it. But the more I got into it, the more I realized the value of it, and that it was strengthening me, not weakening me. And that was like a slap in the face, realizing that I had isolated getting help from being competent. And I think that matters because a lot of us do it. We separate the two things. We can't be competent if we're getting help. Maybe they're not reliable. Maybe they're not tough. Maybe the people getting help, can't hack it anymore. But none of that was true. I was now that guy, and I was doing my job. I was showing up, and I was doing it better than what I had been showing up before I started getting help. So the reality is, needing help doesn't mean you're incompetent. It just means you're human. And man, that is the shift that I needed to find. So again, when the military kind of does deployments, especially now, we get these big events at different intervals, especially in the National Guard, for reintegrating into life. And we sit down and we talk about all the resources there, some of the common struggles that people tend to face, the things that we hear are having happen, but aren't necessarily talking about anybody who uses it, right? It's all there. Obviously, people are using them, otherwise they wouldn't keep getting funding. But nobody talks about it openly, really. We just get the presenters coming out and presenting it. Nobody I knew had ever told me that they were using these resources, that they found value in it previous to this. So again, for me, it was one ear out the other, and now here I am sitting as the top of my company, back home from deployment, knowing the struggles my soldiers were already facing. And we're sitting in this post-deployment event. I'm watching the glaze hit everybody's faces as the PowerPoint slides keep passing by. And I realized nobody's really capturing any of this. And something needed to be shared, something needed to change in that moment. Because here we are getting all the resources presented to us, and I'm not confident that anyone's going to actually do anything with them. And if they are, they're not going to do it with the kind of confidence that they need to have that we've got their back. So this reality started to hit. Sometimes the message doesn't land until someone makes it human. Because up until that point, I've never experienced the message turning into the human experience. So we had a little break. I grabbed the microphone, stood up, and I shared my story in that moment, my 5-minute story about how here I am now, 4-time combat deployed veteran, sitting here watching everybody kind of be disconnected, and it hurts me to my soul because I know the struggle, because I've lived it. I'm living it actively at this time. I'm seeking out these resources and using them, and I wanted them to know that, so that way they could have the confidence that they can go and use them too. So I shared, and I saw this amazing churn of people finding connection into it and suddenly being curious and wanting more information. We went from glazed over to engaged in about 5-10 minutes. And for me, that really hit deep because I was breaking the cycle. And I had senior leadership sitting in at this event as well, who came to me after I spoke, and they said, "That took balls. I can't believe that you just stood up and said that, because the honest truth is I'm using these resources, and never in a million years would I have thought to stand up in front of my soldiers and say that this is important, that I use it, that it's helpful, and that's why I want you to connect to it and lead into it." And it reinforced that having that vulnerability is courage. Being willing to say I'm taking these steps to help myself and getting the help is strength. And it takes a lot of gusto to be able to go out there and be open about it. Because in our culture, in our communities, we don't do that. So I got this little seed now that people don't always connect with the handouts, the slides, or a briefing. But we do connect with someone they respect, says, I need this too, and I'm doing it. And that was really the seed that planted, that has grown now into the Unarmored Project, because these resources matter. But we need to be able to feel connected so that way people reach to them. Part of what helped give me the strength to be open and vulnerable and take that bold step into just putting it out there was while I was on deployment. At this point, we finally get cell phones and internet while we're overseas, which is pretty cool. But I was watching a friend of mine on Instagram while I was overseas openly share posts about her addiction and recovering journey. Watching her do that, I realized I didn't lose respect for her. I didn't judge her for it. I thought it was badass. Here is this friend of mine who's, going through life not as her best self and sharing that journey with people openly, honestly, rawly. And I was like, holy crap, that is real strength. That is real human strength right there. That vulnerability is not weakness. It's not being attention seeking. It's not any of the preconceived notions I had about what being open and vulnerable was. That honesty is strength. And that maybe if I can be more honest about what we're carrying, it makes these resources more reachable, and it'll make me more reachable too. When she was sharing this, it started planting this idea in my head that hearing it, seeing it from somebody else feels like permission that I don't have to hide it anymore. It feels like I was getting permission to say, I need help and I'm not okay, more openly, to acknowledge what I've been carrying. And it really turned that corner for me to say, I should be willing to step up for this stuff. And it broke the lie that I think a lot of us were taught in military and first responder spaces, that help equals needing to hide something. That needing help is something we have to hide and we can't openly display. But I don't believe it, man. I don't believe it anymore. That is a lie that we need to break. None of us are over the impact of what we go through. Doesn't matter our rank, doesn't matter our title or experience, it doesn't matter what the uniform is. We do not stop being human because we serve. So at the end of the day, that's what prompted my journey to be openly shared and what inspired me to get the Unarmored Project up and running. Couple that with, as I'm moving through life and growing and healing, I found a new partner in life to walk beside me who encouraged me to reach out and utilize the tools that we have in this modern day and age to get this message out there. When she started speaking energy into my idea, it just spurred this thing to really want to take off. So when I'm talking about the Unarmored Project, what I really mean is this project is about having conversations. It's about building community, sharing stories, sharing resources, sharing our journey, helping people feel like they have not only the access, but the permission to find what they need. Because the reality is, man, I'm not a therapist. I'm a peer supporter, but I'm not a clinical therapist. I'm not building a crisis center. This podcast is not intended to be therapy for me or anyone else. It's really not a replacement for professional help, but I'm more willing to help point people towards those things. I want to do that. The Unarmored Project is meant to be a bridge between the person who knows something is wrong and the resource that might actually fit. It's a bridge for people who think they're alone and hoping that the story reminds them that they're not. It's a bridge between the resources and the people who may not hear them unless someone else makes the message human. This is why stories matter. This is why communities matter. This is why resource sharing matters. Because just a list of things on a slide with phone numbers or websites, while they're technically available, until we trust it, we understand it, or we see it for ourselves, we might not reach for it. So this is a project that has been built and developed to help the people who are looking and to keep looking. Because I'll tell you, I went through a lot of different programs and processes before I found the one. And the one I'm working with now, man, I found through my peer support network. When I jumped into the peer support world with the fire department, it cracked open this whole resource pool that is just unbelievable. People doing amazing work and people who understand us. So just because something doesn't fit the first time doesn't mean that a good fit isn't out there. And through my journey, I've gotten to find those fits for me. I've gotten to hear what works and doesn't work for other people who, again, share commonality with me. So the project is here to take that and blow it up and blow it open into the world of everybody who's looking, to help you find the options, help you hear the stories, help people understand that if one thing doesn't work, it doesn't mean none of it will work. So again, the Unarmored Project is not here to replace professional help. It's here to help people keep looking for the kind of support that actually fits. And this project started from my own story, but it's just not about me. It's for any first responder out there, military members, veterans, law enforcement, dispatchers, EMS, firefighters, healthcare workers, families, anybody who supports any of those roles. It's for people who serve, people who respond. It's for those leaders out there. Really, it's for anybody who feels like they need to carry things quietly because everyone assumes they're strong enough to handle it. And while you are strong, strength should not mean carrying everything alone. Strength does not mean silence. Strength should not mean isolation. Strength should not mean pretending you're untouched by what you've been through. The reality in our line of work is that our experiences are different. The cultures we work within are different. The things that we see, do, and carry are different from what most people outside of these professions understand. So we need resources that fit, that understand the world we come from. We need people who can speak our language. We need options that fit better than some of those first things that we get handed. We need the community and the space to have that. So my goal here is I'm going to keep sharing them as I find them. I find national resources, local resources. I'm always looking for more peer support options out there. We're going to talk about mental health resources, veteran-specific resources, responder-specific resources. And I really hope you as the community can rally up and bring those things forward too, because someone else's resource may be the door that lost person needs. So by all means, if you found something that helped you, remember it might help someone else keep going. If you're hearing this and any of the story that I've shared resonates with you, I just want you to remember something. You're not weak, you're not broken, you're not beyond help. You're not less of a firefighter, medic, veteran, soldier, dispatcher, nurse. You're not less of a parent, partner, leader, or human being because life has affected you. You are human. And being human means there are limits to what we carry alone. Being human means that if one resource doesn't fit, it doesn't mean you failed. If one counselor didn't connect, that doesn't mean therapy doesn't help. If one system felt frustrating, doesn't mean every door is closed. Just because a conversation did not go the way we hoped, doesn't mean that we should just stop trying. It's important to remember that a resource not fitting you does not mean you are beyond help. It means we keep looking for the right door. And if you are in immediate danger, if you're in that spot where you need help right here, right now, I want you to reach out immediately. Remember, you can call 988 in the United States. You can text them. You can go to the 988 website and get into a chat immediately. If you're a veteran or a service member, you can do that 988 pathway and press 1 and it gets you with the Veterans Crisis Line. And those resources help out a lot too. I've been there and I've used it, and it is amazing. If you're in that space, please go to someone safe, call someone, text someone, get yourself around somebody else. This podcast is a resource bridge, but it's not crisis care. But you do matter enough to get help right now, and I can say this personally. I have had to use crisis lifelines myself when I was in so deep that I just didn't know where else to go to. And like I said, they help. They create that much needed pause. And sometimes that pause is enough to get to the next step. The pause matters. So this is just the beginning. Goal in our Unarmored Project is to keep sharing the stories, keep sharing the resources, keep up conversations that help people feel less disconnected and less alone. I'm going to continue using Instagram to share pieces of the journey, the things I'm learning and resources I find along the way. This podcast is going to keep going. At this point, it's going to be a monthly podcast because I don't want to rush stories. These stories need care. I don't want to create content just to try to keep up with the schedule. I want it to be real. I want it to be something you can trust. And I want to give it the attention that it deserves. I want there to be space where conversations can have room to breathe, where the stories can be handled with respect, a space where resources are shared in a way that feels human and useful. And as this continues to grow and develop, I look forward to bringing in more voices, more stories, more conversations, and more people to help build these bridges. Because the reality is that this isn't just my story, and it shouldn't just be my story. This should become a space where people can hear something and think, man, I'm not the only one. There's still out there, help out there for me. Maybe I can just take that next step. So thank you again for joining me on the first episode. If you need something, if you're looking for a resource, or if you found something that helped you, please send a message. You can share it anonymously, you can share it openly. Either way, I want to keep building this together. So if this episode made you think of someone, please check in on them. Not just with a, are you good, but follow that up with the real one. No, really, how are you doing? Because sometimes that second question is where the door opens. And that door is always the beginning of support. So again, this is the Unarmored Project, a space for honest stories, real conversations, helping people find support before they feel like they have to carry everything alone. Stay safe out there, stay connected, and when you're ready, set down that armor, even just a little.